Take a moment to listen to the thoughts currently looping in your head. Now ask yourself, who exactly is the one listening? Author Michael Singer calls that internal narrator the inner roommate. It is a highly neurotic, hypercritical voice that comments on every action, catalogs every anxiety, and demands constant attention. We spend most of our waking hours entirely fused with this dialogue. We assume that because the voice speaks in the first person, its endless stream of judgments and complaints must be our actual identity. Spiritual teacher Eckhart Tolle refers to this as form identity. From childhood, society trains us to construct a sense of self by stringing together our personal history, our social roles, and our psychological habits into a coherent narrative. The personality we fiercely defend and constantly try to improve is not an innate essence. It is a restrictive, socially conditioned construct, a character we have convinced ourselves we are playing. We can see how fragile this construct is when it suddenly collapses. Psychologists call it ambiguous loss, a phenomenon highly visible in retiring professional athletes. When the physical dominance and social validation of the sport disappear, the athlete is left mourning an identity that hasn't died but ceased to function. The exact same crisis strikes high-stakes executives. Strip away the title, the schedule, and the corporate hierarchy, and the power structure that gave their life meaning evaporates. What remains in that void is often sheer panic. Without the scaffolding of past achievements or future goals to hold on to, people are forced to confront the terrifying possibility that they are not their resumes or their bodies. Philosopher Alan Watts argued that this crisis happens because we buy into a hoax, the illusion of the skin-encapsulated ego. He observed that modern culture maintains a strict taboo against looking beyond this illusion. We are taught to view ourselves as isolated fragments dropped into a hostile universe, rather than natural expressions of the universe itself. The devastation of losing your career or your status is entirely real to the person experiencing it, but that suffering is simply the friction of the human mind being forcefully woken up to its own illusion. Thousands of years before modern psychology named this identity crisis, Eastern contemplatives were already reverse engineering the human mind to solve it. Through rigorous internal observation, they mapped the exact boundaries of the ego. Early Buddhist practitioners developed the concept of anatman. After exhaustively analyzing the physical body, perceptions, and consciousness, they concluded there is no permanent, unchanging self anywhere to be found in the human architecture. The Hindu tradition approached the same void, but labeled it Atman. They identified a permanent, quiet witnessing consciousness that sits behind the mask of our daily thoughts, watching the human experience unfold. While they use different terminology, both ancient frameworks arrive at the exact same conclusion. The localized, anxious ego is a temporary vehicle you are riding in, not the passenger. The voice in your head is not a biological necessity required for existence. It is a conceptual mirage that obscures your true nature. Modern neuroscience has actually located the biological engine generating that mirage. It is a specific web of neural pathways known as the default mode network. It is the machinery responsible for creating personal boundaries and maintaining the continuous narrative of me. During psychedelic therapy or deep meditative states, activity in this exact network drops significantly. When this neural boundary dissolving too rapidly without proper preparation, the result is extreme psychological distress. Carl Jung referred to this acute loss of subjective identity as psychic death. In clinical settings, this is sometimes observed as mystical psychosis. The conceptualized self, feeling its boundaries slipping away, violently fights for its own survival. Historical accounts of the dark night of the soul describe this exact terror. It is the subjective experience of the brain's ego machinery losing its rigid grip on reality. If the ego is an illusion, the question becomes how to function once you see through it. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre offered a framework for building a conscious identity. Sartre stated that existence precedes essence. We do not arrive in this world as fixed objects with a pre-written destiny. We are fluid, conscious beings who continually create our own meaning through action. Eckhart Tolle takes this a step further, proposing a structural solution to the suffering of the ego, shifting our awareness into what he calls the vertical dimension. Most people live entirely on the horizontal dimension, a timeline stretched between the traumas of the past and the anxieties of the future. The vertical dimension represents the timeless, observing presence of the current moment. The objective is not to permanently destroy the ego. You still need an identity to navigate society. The goal is to root your awareness in the vertical axis, where you can observe your ego's reactions without actually identifying with them. To identify exclusively with the voice in your head is to live as a single ripple on the surface of the water, terrified of crashing onto the shore. Awakening is the realization that you are not the ripple, you are the ocean. You did not arrive here as an isolated fragment fighting for survival in a disconnected world. You are the universe itself, temporarily taking human form to experience its own existence.